The room was silent, but not in the respectful kind of way. It was the kind of silence that lets humiliation echo louder. Two people from HR sat across from me, eyes fixed on a stapler between them, like it held the answer to life itself. They didn't look at me, didn't say my name, just slid a printed letter across the table like I was being handed a parking ticket, not a sentence after 17 years of loyalty. Due to organizational restructuring, your position has been eliminated. No handshake, no thank you, just cold rehearsed lines and a box of tissues that no one offered. I couldn't speak, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew if I opened my mouth, the tears would come, and I refused to let them see me break. 17 years. I missed weddings, holidays, and every birthday I never threw. I was the one they called at midnight when a system crashed, the one who trained their executive sons on how to fake competence. And now I was disposable. My badge was deactivated by the time I reached the elevator. Before I tell you how I responded, how I flipped this story on its head, where are you listening from today? And more importantly, have you ever been discarded by something you gave your whole self to? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the exact strength someone else needs to hear tonight. I wasn't always the woman in the corner office. When I first joined Halden Metrics, it was a scrappy little firm renting 2 floors above a parking garage in downtown Seattle. The carpets were stained, the coffee machine hissed more than it brewed, and no one could explain what made us different from a dozen other analytics startups. But I saw potential. In the chaos, in the messy pitches, in the anxious client calls, I saw patterns. And I knew that if we could track not just data, but behavior, if we stopped chasing clicks and started predicting why people did what they did, we could build something that actually mattered. I spent the next 17 years doing just that. While others chased titles, I built systems. While they rotated through managers, I stayed. I was the one who turned a 2-person account with OmniWave Retail into our highest revenue client. I negotiated contracts, rewrote service models, trained analysts, put out fires, sometimes all in the same day. People used to joke that I had a 6th sense for client anxiety. I could tell when a deal was about to unravel before anyone else even saw the thread loosening. But behind the control and composure, there was just me, a woman who went home to a quiet apartment, a cat named Jasper, and a row of bonsai trees that never quite grew the way I wanted. No family photos on my desk, no kids waiting at home, just the soft buzz of analytics dashboards and the hum of fluorescent lights long after everyone else had gone home. Some people called me irreplaceable. Others called me a workaholic. I called it loyalty. And for a long time, I believed that loyalty would protect me, until the day I saw my name removed from the executive org chart without warning, without explanation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened right before that. The moment I first realized something wasn't right. It started small, so small I almost missed it. A calendar invite that somehow didn't include me. A strategic planning session that got moved to an impromptu off-site at a golf course I wasn't invited to. A client renewal call I usually led, suddenly reassigned to someone newer, someone who barely knew the account. I told myself it was just a shift, a phase. Companies evolve, right? Maybe leadership wanted to diversify the decision-making process. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then came the email. It was a forwarded thread from a former colleague now working in a different division. She hadn't meant to send it to me, at least not directly. The message simply read, "Thought you should see this." Attached was a planning document, internal only, outlining a leadership realignment initiative. At the top of the list, my department, my position. And in bold next to the word successor was a name I recognized but barely, Nate Landry, the chairman's son. Fresh MBA, smiles too wide, questions too shallow. I remembered meeting him once at a company mixer. He told me he was looking forward to shadowing real executives. I thought it was just cocktail hour confidence. I didn't know he was being groomed to replace me. Reading that email felt like someone had kicked the air out of my lungs, not because I was shocked, but because deep down I had felt it coming. And yet it still hurt. The worst part wasn't that they were replacing me. It was that they'd been planning it while smiling to my face, while asking for my input, while having me train junior staff on accounts I'd personally built. This wasn't just restructuring. It was removal, slow, silent, and strategic. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you room to listen, to watch, to plan. And the very next day, I noticed something that made everything suddenly very clear. But I'll tell you about that in just a moment. The morning after that email, I arrived at the office before sunrise like I always did. The building was still quiet, lights half on, coffee machines barely starting to hiss. I liked that time of day, the calm before the flood. It gave me space to think, to prepare. But that morning, the silence felt off, like something was waiting for me. I swiped my badge at the elevator. It worked, so I told myself I was overreacting. But when I logged into my computer, the screen blinked twice, then nothing. Access denied. I tried again. Different login portal. Then another. Still locked out. I called IT. The voice on the other end paused for a beat too long before saying, looks like your credentials have been restricted. Hold on, let me check something. Click. Hold music. A knot formed in my stomach. A few minutes later, a junior IT guy showed up at my desk, eyes darting like he didn't want to be seen talking to me. He handed me a sealed envelope and said, "They asked me to give you this, and you're supposed to go to HR before noon." Inside the envelope, a new badge, different color, no title, and a printed memo. Effective immediately, my role had been reassigned to a support-level function in the analytics department. No explanation, no negotiation. Just done. I wasn't escorted out. That would have made too much noise. Instead, I was quietly relocated, tucked away into a back corner on the 5th floor between the supply closet and the broken printer no one ever fixed. No one said it, but I saw it in their faces. The whispers, the nervous smiles. Madeline Fox, once the gatekeeper of half the company's revenue, now just another desk. I sat down in my new chair, still gripping the envelope, and then I opened the company portal. Clicked on the org chart. My name was gone. I stared at the screen, not blinking. And then I saw something that stopped me cold. A new entry. Nate Landry, Director of Strategic Growth. My old title with a shinier label. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a message. But if they thought I'd disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. Let me show you what I did next. That night, I couldn't sleep. I'd made tea, fed Jasper, watered my bonsai trees, even though they didn't need it. I tried reading, but the words blurred together. My body was still, but my mind, it wouldn't shut off. I kept replaying it. All the email, the new badge, the empty spot on the org chart where my name used to be. It wasn't sadness that kept me up. It was something sharper, something closer to betrayal. And then my phone buzzed. 12:17 a.m. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something told me to pick up. Madeline? The voice was familiar. It was Isaiah Patel, Chief Operating Officer at OmniWave Retail, one of our biggest clients, one I'd worked with personally for over a decade. "Sorry to call so late," he said quickly. "I was just surprised. We got a transition notice today. Someone named Nate is now our point of contact." I stayed quiet. "He showed up to a strategy call this afternoon," Isaiah continued. "Didn't know the system. Didn't know our roadmap. He spent more time talking about his vision than listening to what we actually need." A pause. "Madeline, what's going on over there?" I took a breath. Not too deep. I didn't want my voice to crack. "There's been a restructure," I said flatly. "I'm no longer part of the executive team." Silence. "Well," he said, with a tone I hadn't heard from him before, "that's a mistake." There was something in his voice, not just concern, but intent. "Look," he added, "we're entering a major expansion phase next quarter. We need continuity, not confusion. If you're available, even off the record, we should talk." I didn't answer right away, because in that moment, something clicked. The company thought it had erased me, but out there in the real world, the people who mattered still remembered, still trusted me. And maybe, just maybe, that was leverage. I told Isaiah I'd call him tomorrow. What I didn't tell him was that this call had just lit a fire I hadn't felt in years. And the next morning, I walked into the office with a new plan, one they would never see coming. By 7:05 the next morning, I was already at my desk, or rather, my new desk. Same office building, different world. No executive access, no meetings, just me, a borrowed monitor, and a tangle of leftover office supplies in a drawer that still smelled like someone else's coffee. But I wasn't here for status anymore. I was here to observe. Every corner conversation, every shift in project responsibility, every calendar update that used to come to me but now went through Nate, I took mental notes. I smiled politely. I kept my head down. On the surface, I looked like a demoted lifer clinging to a paycheck, but underneath, I was building something. That afternoon, Isaiah called again. "I talked to our board," he said. "They're concerned. Your replacement's been pushing for system changes we didn't request. There's confusion over reports, and our compliance team's raising red flags." I stayed silent, letting him talk. "Look, Madeline, we need help, real help, not PR spins or empty promises." I floated an idea, and the board is open to it. A consulting arrangement. Quiet. For now. My heart skipped. "You mean outside the company?" "Yes. Independent. You'd work directly with OmniWave. Help us manage the transition, maybe longer. We'll keep it under the radar until the contract renews." I looked around the room. Fluorescent lights, dented filing cabinets, a potted plant someone left behind that was dying slowly in the corner. This place had erased me, but out there, I still mattered. "I need to think about it," I said carefully. "Of course," Isaiah replied, "but don't take too long. The current leadership over there, they're not just fumbling, they're burning trust." When the call ended, I sat in silence for a while. This offer, it wasn't just about money or pride. It was about agency, the power to choose my next move rather than have it handed to me in an envelope. And that night, as I updated an old laptop with my personal files and rebuilt my consulting resume from scratch, I knew whatever I decided next would be on my terms. But first, I needed to see exactly how deep the damage had gone inside the company. So I stayed. I watched. And soon, I saw something I couldn't ignore. There's something oddly powerful about being underestimated. For the first time in years, I wasn't being copied on every email, dragged into every meeting, or asked to fix what others had broken. I wasn't expected to lead. I wasn't expected to know. And that gave me something I'd never had before: invisibility. I used it well. Each morning, I arrived early, earlier than I needed to. I made coffee, answered low-priority tickets, filed vendor reports no one cared about. All the while, I kept my ears open, watched calendars shift, noticed who got invited to what and who suddenly didn't. Nate had taken over my title, but not my role. He moved fast, too fast. He scheduled strategy reviews with clients during their blackout periods. Changed how reports were formatted without asking why they were built that way in the first place. I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I said nothing. Instead, after hours, I logged into my personal laptop and met virtually with OmniWave's compliance team. I walked them through the system I designed, line by line, rule by rule. I documented everything I'd never had time to before. And during the day, I watched Nate dismantle it, piece by piece. He dismissed concerns from the account managers who had been on those calls with me for years, brushed off red flags from QA. And when our junior analyst tried to explain why a certain trigger existed in our report logic, Nate cut her off mid-sentence. It's outdated. We're modernizing. Except it wasn't outdated. It was precise, deliberate, necessary for regulatory compliance. And now it was being replaced by something shinier but hollow. Still, I stayed quiet. Because I knew what they didn't. There are some systems you can't rebuild in a month, especially when the person tearing them down doesn't even know why they existed. Then, one Friday afternoon, a calendar alert popped up on my screen. A client emergency meeting. OmniWave requesting full executive attendance. And just like that, I knew the cracks were no longer invisible. They were breaking wide open. But what happened in that meeting, even I didn't see coming. Monday morning came with an unusual energy. There was tension in the air, not the usual post-weekend sluggishness, but something sharper. Whispers in hallways, Slack messages going unanswered, executives walking faster than usual, phones glued to their ears. At 9 a.m. sharp, a meeting alert flashed across company inboxes. Urgent OmniWave, executive review, attendance mandatory. By 9:10, I was seated quietly in the back corner of the large conference room, just outside the camera frame. Technically, I wasn't even on the invite list, but someone had forwarded it to me by accident, or maybe on purpose. The screen came to life. Isaiah Patel's face filled the monitor, calm, composed, and colder than I'd ever seen him. "We're here today," he began, "because over the past 3 weeks, your system has failed us. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly." The room shifted uncomfortably. Nate cleared his throat and leaned forward, doing his best confident leader impression. "There are always some hiccups during a transition phase. We're actively streamlining the platform." To Isaiah, cut him off. "Your streamlining has caused 3 compliance reports to be filed incorrectly. One of them directly triggered a regulatory audit. And your new reporting dashboard, it doesn't even recognize our regional risk flags. We flagged this 2 weeks ago." Nothing was done. Silence. I kept my expression neutral. Someone from legal scribbled notes. The CFO looked like he might be physically ill. Isaiah continued, voice steady but firm. "We chose your firm because we trusted your team, specifically the person who built the system, the one who understood our business, our risks, and our goals. That person is no longer in the room." All eyes drifted toward me. No one said it. But in that moment, they all realized I had been in the room the whole time, watching, listening. And now the one person who could actually fix this wasn't on payroll anymore. The CEO attempted to salvage the moment. "We value your partnership, Isaiah. Perhaps we can revisit the structure of the transition. There's always room for collaboration." Isaiah's tone didn't waver. "We're no longer interested in collaboration. We're preparing to restructure the contract." He ended the call without a goodbye. The silence in the room after the screen went black was deafening. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because that afternoon, I got a meeting request from the CEO's assistant. Subject line, private discussion, midweek, you and Nate. And I knew the real confrontation was coming. The conference room felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the tension that had settled like fog over the table. At exactly 2 p.m., I walked in, not late, not early, just on time. The chairs were already filled, the CEO at the head, Nate sitting stiffly 2 seats down, legal counsel to his right, and the heads of strategy, finance, and client relations forming a tight semicircle. My badge had gotten me past security, but I knew this wasn't a casual invitation. This was a test. The CEO looked up, managing a tight smile. "Madeline," he said, voice clipped, "glad you could join us." I nodded once, quietly taking a seat at the far end of the table. No notebook, no laptop, just me. They spent the first 10 minutes trying to reframe what had happened, calling it client friction and platform misalignment. Nate spoke with forced confidence, quoting engagement metrics and future feature rollouts like a man trying to plug holes in a sinking boat with buzzwords. But then Isaiah's team joined the call, three of them: operations, compliance, and legal. Calm, prepared, and not interested in excuses. We were promised continuity, their lead counsel said. Instead, we've had instability and exposure. The custom system you built for us was removed without a compliance review. That's not just risky, that's negligent. The CEO shifted in his seat. We've asked Nate to make the necessary adjustments. With all due respect, Isaiah interrupted, Nate doesn't understand what was built, and quite frankly, neither does your executive team. And then, slowly, like a spotlight turning his gaze landed on me. Madeline, he said, you were the architect. Can you confirm whether these system failures stem from the removal of your original framework? I met his eyes, calm, steady. Yes, I said simply. The system was built to handle their regulatory profile. The replacement ignores that entirely. Silence. The CEO looked stunned. Legal coughed into his hand. Nate's face flushed, the bravado finally slipping. I wasn't here to embarrass anyone. I was here to tell the truth, and the truth had weight. But as the meeting wrapped up and the CEO nervously promised to review internal options, I felt that shift in the room. The realization that the person they had dismissed might be the only one who could save them. Later that afternoon, I got a call, not from Isaiah, from the CEO himself. He wanted to talk, alone, and I had a feeling I knew exactly what he was about to offer. But I also knew it was already too late to fix this on his terms. The CEO's assistant asked me to meet him in his private office. No formal calendar invite, no mention of HR, just a quiet message and a floor number. I walked in and found him already seated behind a sleek desk polished to a mirror finish. The blinds were half drawn, muting the skyline behind him. He gestured toward the chair across from his, like this was just another friendly check-in. But his eyes told a different story. Madeline, he began folding his hands, we both know this situation has gone further than anyone anticipated. I said nothing. We respect everything you've contributed, he continued, voice coded in diplomacy. And frankly, we've realized that removing you from your position may not have been the wisest choice. He leaned forward slightly. I'd like to offer you a reinstatement, director level, full authority over client operations, a compensation increase, and equity if you return immediately and help us repair the OmniWave relationship. It was the kind of offer most people would dream of. Prestige, power, payback. But I wasn't most people. I looked around the office. I remembered sitting across from him during performance reviews, being told I was essential, being promised long-term vision, and then, months later, being erased like I was a line item on a spreadsheet. I met his gaze. I appreciate the offer, I said calmly. But I'm not interested in going back. He blinked. I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly, I said. I'm not coming back to rebuild something that never saw my value until it was gone. Silence stretched. He didn't threaten, not directly, but his voice grew colder. I hope you're making the right decision. I already did, I replied, standing. The moment I realized I didn't need this office to be respected. As I left, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. But I also knew this decision would ripple through the company faster than any memo. And the next 48 hours, they would change everything. The ripple was immediate. By the next morning, I was no longer just the woman from analytics quietly sipping coffee near the copy machine. People looked at me differently, not with pity, but with something closer to recognition, maybe even regret. Word had spread. The CEO's offer, my refusal. And more importantly, the fact that OmniWave had moved forward with a contract revision that would cut the company's revenue by nearly 40%. Nate didn't say much after that meeting. I passed him once in the hallway, and he avoided eye contact. His once confident stride had been replaced by something smaller, the careful shuffle of someone trying not to be noticed. Later that day, I overheard two senior managers whispering near the elevator. "He's stepping down." Grad school, I think. Damage control. That's what this is. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Because honestly, I didn't feel victorious. Just free. That afternoon, I took a walk around the block during lunch. The sky was overcast, but the air was cool clean. I ended up across the street from the building where I'd spent nearly 2 decades of my life. From that distance, it looked different, smaller, less intimidating. I thought about all the late nights, the weekends, the holidays I'd sacrificed for a title that was always conditional, a value that was always negotiable, until I said no. My phone buzzed, a message from Isaiah. "Final signatures are in. You're officially our lead systems consultant. Welcome to the next chapter." I stared at that message for a long moment, then put my phone away. Because I knew the next chapter wasn't just about career. It was about reclaiming time, voice, peace. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But there was still one more thing I had to do. Something not for them, but for me. 6 weeks later, I no longer wore a badge. I no longer answered to inbox pings at midnight. And I no longer walked into that building with a heart full of armor. Instead, I worked from a small home office with soft lighting and a window that overlooked a blooming garden I finally had time to tend. My days were focused, meaningful, but not punishing. I met with OmniWave's tech team twice a week. We rebuilt their system from the ground up, not as a reaction to failure, but as a reflection of trust. Isaiah gave me space. His team gave me respect. And that did something I didn't expect. It healed me. As for Nate, he quietly withdrew from the company. No announcement, no goodbye email, just gone. I heard he enrolled in business school on the East Coast, maybe to start over. Maybe to learn what leadership actually means. The CEO, he stayed long enough to oversee damage control, but by the next quarter, a restructuring memo came down. Irony has its own timing. But me, I didn't watch it all unravel with bitterness. I didn't need them to fall apart for me to rise. Because in the end, this wasn't about revenge. It was about waking up. Waking up to the truth that your worth isn't defined by who recognizes it, but by whether you honor it yourself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without burning the place down. Not because you couldn't, but because it no longer deserves your fire. So if you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or told your time was up, ask yourself, was it the end or just the beginning of something you couldn't see yet? I'd love to hear your story. Have you ever walked away from something or someone and finally felt free? Drop it in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it.